Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for the latest edition of the Live Mic. I apologize for being a little late this evening. No, I wasn't watching hockey, which I'm sure some of you would expect from the resident Canadian here at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Did experience some technical difficulties, so my apologies on that. But we're going to have a great show tonight. We've got a couple interesting topics coming down the pipeline for you guys. Kicking things right off the top, we're going to dive right into some training camp battles. We are really in the thick of things right now, and there's some key battles I really want to touch on. Pretty much exclusively all on the offensive side of the football right now. I think for the most part that this defensive side of the ball is pretty locked in where most of the guys are going to slot into this defense. So I think a lot of the interesting stuff is coming from that offensive side. And then when we flip over to our next part, I think we'll chat a little bit about that opening day roster and who we're going to see starting on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Namely tonight, getting right into things when it comes to camp battles. We can start right at the most important position there is in football, and that's the quarterback spot. Of course, that's not Ben Roethlisberger is not the guy who's needs to worry here, nor does Mason Rudolph. Even though some people haven't tuned into that, but it comes to that third and fourth stringer spot, depending on where they go. Paxton Lynch or Devlin Duck Hodges. Of course, Devlin Hodges had a couple starts in there last year, but Paxton Lynch comes in with that first-round pedigree. He's a little bit taller. He's got a bigger arm. And he kind of sat in the practice squad once Ben went down with injury a year ago. Paxton Lynch, he is someone that I have thought pretty highly about, rather, when it comes to that all-important quarterback position, comes to covering a backup, and potentially someone that has can push perhaps even Mason Rudolph for that second spot. And I think the reason why I like Paxton Lynch over Devlin Hodges, even one of them got playing time over the other, I think it's his first round pedigree and what he really has and what his potential is compared to Devlin Hodges. When we watched Paxton Lynch a year ago in the preseason when he was playing for Seattle, I legitimately thought he was going to be their number 2 quarterback. And when he was cut, I was a little surprised by that, to be honest with you. I didn't think Seattle had a very good depth at quarterback a year ago, and I know a lot of sites have ranked them for having some of the worst when it comes to that quarterback depth league-wide. However, I think it might have been a bit of a mistake, but who really knows what was going on there exactly? But Paxton Lynch, now a Steeler, I think he can absolutely kind of take over that job as that third-string quarterback and potentially push Mason Rudolph for that number 2 spot, just because of what he brings to the table, what he's able to do. Of course, having that big arm, he's pretty athletic and can get involved in the run game. But it's going to be interesting. We already know at quarterback, Big Ben's going to be there slinging the rock, and then behind him is Mason Rudolph. And then number 3, it's even possible that the Steelers don't take either of those guys, because as we're going to see in our next 2 positions, it is quite possible the Steelers take 4 running backs, and they could take upwards of 6 receivers with them into week 1. And then obviously some positions are going to have to take a hit if that's exactly what happens. And then if that's the case, both quarterbacks being cut, I think would be a bit of a shock. But if it means keeping the likes of a Jalen Samuels around, or who knows, a Dion Kane around, I think it's a move the Steelers might be tempted to make, especially when it comes to how much playing time a third-string quarterback gets, which should be 0. Each and every year, you shouldn't get a single snap out of your third stringer. And if you are getting snaps from your backup, hopefully it's not injury. Hopefully it's just because you got your playoff spot set. But because of that, I think the Steelers are going to be faced with some interesting questions here, whether or not they should bring in a third-string quarterback. I think they will, just because Ben's health injuries, but I'm leaning more towards Paxton Lynch here, just because of his size and athletic ability over Devlin Hodges. That's not a knock to Hodges, but personally, I just kind of liked I liked Lynch in college, and I just kind of like his intangibles and what he can do a little bit better than what Duck can do. Kicking things back to the spot behind him at running back, I think one of the more interesting battles in training camp is that running back spot, especially if they do decide to bring 4 guys. We already know Benny Snell, James Conner, and Anthony McFarland, freshly drafted Anthony McFarland, aren't going anywhere this offseason. But the Steelers are in a spot to carry 4 running backs. And I think out of the names I'm about to list off for you, I think there's an interesting dynamic, because if they take 4 running backs, that probably means they're taking 5 wide receivers, and that 4th running back might be someone that can take some reps in the slot necessarily. And that kind of bodes well for the talents of Jalen Samuels, Gareth White, and Wendell Smallwood. There's reports out of training camp that Wendell Smallwood has been impressing. So that's super interesting there, because he is, I believe, the most recent addition to the Steelers roster. Behind him, Jalen Samuels is just coming off the COVID-19 reserve list, so he hasn't had any snaps yet whatsoever. But he's back now, and he's going to have to earn a spot. I think a year ago, he struggled a little bit, but I think that's mostly to do with all the running backs' struggles, because teams were stacking the box. I think it might be unfair that so many of us, including myself, I have done it, I will admit, have kind of thrown Samuel's name to the wayside, and as a guy that could potentially be cut. If it comes to that, I think there's a higher chance that he actually gets traded. And as I've stated before, I think a good landing spot for him would be like a Carolina, where he could line up behind Mr. Christian McCaffrey, and he can do exactly, well, he can't exactly do what McCaffrey does, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he can take some snaps if McCaffrey needs some plays off. So that's the interesting thing with him. Gareth White is the next name that could potentially take the spot. And what there is to like about Gareth White is he stepped on the field and he provided a spark, which was pretty sparse last year when it came to the Steelers offense. Gareth White, he proves to be an interesting name because he was snagged off that Chicago Bears practice roster a year ago. And when he was in, he impressed a little bit. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if any of those 3 names that I've already listed would be that running back 4. And I do believe the Steelers will take 4 running backs. That name, I think they will take, especially because that 4th guy is going to have to do some stuff in special teams, as well as potentially stuff in the receiving game, is Jalen Samuels. I've flip-flopped on this a few times, but I think my heart is set here on Jalen Samuels being that 4th running back / slot receiver / wildcat quarterback, because just his abilities in kind of all phases in the game are probably a little bit higher than the other 2. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers potentially kept another running back around, just based on that practice squad veteran spots that are available. Now, carrying 5 running backs throughout your entire depth chart would be ridiculous, and you probably wouldn't have to take too many of those guys. But I think the Steelers will take 4, and it's really going to come down to how many snaps Anthony McFarland's going to get when it comes to playing time for that 4th running back. And I wouldn't imagine too much production make that for Jalen Samuels. If he were to make the team when it came to the rushing game, he could potentially catch some pass out of the backfield, and as a slot receiver, if he were to beat out, say, a Orion Switzer type for that kind of job. So he is kind of a flex player. Of course, he came out of college as a tight end, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him play a little bit more out of position in 2020 if Samuels makes this roster, which I am predicting that he will. Kicking things out to wide receiver next. We have a interesting little dynamic here, especially because that whole running back slot receiver potential. And it comes to wide receiver 5, because if they take 4 running backs, I just can't see them taking 3 quarterbacks and 6 wide receivers. That's filling up your roster real quick. Of course, your core 4 wide receivers, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, and 2nd-round pick Chase Claypool, rounding out your core 4. That 5th spot is still an important spot, especially if there's injury, especially depending on your sets. I know Eric Ebron will probably line up in 5 wide receiver sets just based on his kind of abilities and what he kind of is able to do. But that 5th wide receiver spot is still super important when it comes to depth. And that's why I think the Steelers would be more inclined to take a Dion Kane over Orion Switzer if they're going with 5. I think Kane, rather, combining his names, gosh darn it. But I think Kane can do a few things better than Ryan Switzer. I think you can play him out wide. You can play him in the slot. And you can motion him around. Kane showed a ton of flashes last year, and he's another name that was plucked off the Colts practice squad last year. And he took some of those snaps away from Johnny Holton, those kind of sideline deep routes that Johnny Holton was kind of devouring a little bit when he got those plays thrown at him. When Kane came in, he made some highlight reel type plays, and honestly, that kind of got the attention of both myself and a ton of members of Steelers Nation. I think Dion Kane is someone who will make this roster, and we'll actually see a bit of a statistical bump just because he didn't play too much last year, bouncing around the practice squads of the two teams. But I think Dion Kane is definitely someone who could potentially be a gunner on special teams. He could slot in if there's an injury again, and he is someone that I could also see running some of that jet motions that Matt Canada likes to do so much. So if that's the case, I think the Steelers go 3 quarterbacks, Lynch being quarterback 3, 4 running backs, Samuels being the last, and then 5 wide receivers, Kane over guys like Switzer, Saeed Blacknall, and the rest of the practice squad trio there. But you know what? I think the Steelers, if they do take 5 wide receivers, I think you can expect them to add one of those guys that don't make the team into that kind of practice squad scenario. Even Orion Switzer, even if you don't like that name a whole lot, he is someone that could be on that veteran practice squad list. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a move that's made, but I don't think at this point that they're going to take that many skill positions. So I would expect I'd expect Switzer to probably flirt around that practice squad, maybe get a call up if there's injury, but I'm not holding my breath out on that. Moving over to our next battle, we have the right tackles. And what's interesting here is this is probably the position battle that's going to affect this offense's team the most here. Zach Banner, Chuks Okorafor. One of these guys is going to be starting offensive tackle for your Pittsburgh Steelers. The other guy is probably going to be that 6 swing tight end. And you know what? I think this is going to be extremely interesting. Of course, Chuks battled a little bit of injury last year. Banner got that 6th swing spot already under his belt, a little bit of playing time for himself. He was dominant in the run game, and anytime you knew Banner was coming on the field, you knew they were going to run the ball, but he did look good when he was out there. He's changed his body type. I've seen photos of Chuks Okorafor even. He's also showed off the work he has put in this offseason. And you know what? It's kind of exciting to see both guys taking this so seriously. And one of these two guys is going to take the job. If Big Al is to retire or not to sign of extension, I could see both these guys being the team's both of their starting tackles come 2021. So I don't think all is lost for whoever loses this battle, but of course, both guys, they're there to compete. They're there to win. But I think what you kind of get better from either guy, I think Chuks is probably a little bit better in pass pro and Banner in the run game just due to his sheer size. He's a bit of a mauler. It's going to be interesting to see where this one goes because it can really go either way. I don't really think there is a favorite right now. Of course, Zach Banner's kind of that big personality guy, that great locker room guy, but that's not buying you a spot. And he's a guy that obviously bet on himself signing that 1-year contract worth not as much money as he probably could have made if he signed for a longer deal with the Steelers or elsewhere. But he is someone that was on the program and, you know what, shared some thoughts about his season, and he's shredded down. He looks to be in the best shape of his career. Of course, when he was playing in Cleveland, I believe it was, he tipped the scales at over 400 pounds. He shredded almost 100 pounds off of him, and he looks to be doing great. And he is a kind of guy that could could potentially make a big impact on this team. Of course, both guys, former third-round picks. I think when it comes down to it, either one of those names are going to end up as starters come 2021. But when it comes to our next spot, it's a little bit different because if you've been keeping up with my Steelers A to Z articles on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, you noticed that yesterday we talked about a second punter on the roster who is still on the roster. And it really shouldn't matter. We shouldn't really care too much about that kind of spot. But because of Jordan Berry's struggles the last couple of years, I think the punter position is one that we need to keep an eye over on. And you know what? Corliss Waitman is still on this team, which after having to be forced to make 10 cuts, and the Steelers taking a punter instead of keeping one of these skill guys that they had to move on from speaks volumes to me. And I think when you look down to it, I think the writing could be on the wall for one Jordan Berry. Once that those COVID cuts kind of came down through the pipeline, I made some predictions, and I said Waitman was the first name that came to mind that would be cut, but he wasn't. So what it really screams to me is I think the Steelers have finally recognized the consistency of Jordan Berry's punts have kind of fallen off the cliff from his early years with the team. And keeping a guy like Corliss Waitman, who a year ago only had just a shade over 41 punt average in terms of yardage. Jordan Berry last year was just over 45 yards a punt. When it comes to Waitman's 2018, however, he was flirting with NFL average-ish numbers, which for another factor to me is, why are you keeping two punters on this roster? I feel like the organization could probably figure out who's better at punting super quickly here in training camp. And after a couple weeks in, I think they could absolutely kind of move on from one of the two guys just based on who's able to kick it further and have a little more precision. And you know what? The pressure is on because these guys are competing for their NFL careers. And you know what? If the Steelers do go in a different direction at punter, I think Steelers fans would welcome it just because some of the frustration shared at one Mr. Jordan Berry kind of pooching the ball a little bit. It wasn't as bad as it was in 2018. I will give him credit, but the punts did seem to trail off as the year went by. But when it comes to that punter spot, you know, it really shouldn't be one we should be talking about. But it is one that the Steelers are going to have to deal with. If Jordan Berry can't get that consistency under control, I wouldn't be too concerned if they move on from Jordan Berry. Before we continue along, guys, I forgot to mention off the top, we still got our jersey contest going. The second I log off here, if you haven't already jumped in on that, I'm going to be drawing a winner. And then tomorrow at noon, Eastern time, that is, of course, out here in the West Coast, it'll be a little bit earlier for me. We'll be proud to announce the winner of the signed Juju Smith-Schuster jersey. So if you haven't already, make sure to click over and make sure you're retweeting on Twitter, commenting on Instagram, and sharing on Facebook. We're excited to give that away and continue our partnership with Total Sports Enterprises. And before we kind of move on to our next topic here today, I kind of want to recap a little bit about these position battles, especially when it comes to our quarterback spots. It's going to be super interesting to see how this ends up. Namely because what happened with Ben's elbow a year ago, I don't think the Steelers want to be caught with their pants down again, and they're going to do their due diligence, make that when it comes to finding these guys. We don't have any preseason games to rely on here, and that's going to really affect a lot of these guys and kind of sways the pendulum for these battles to guys that have a little bit more experience. Now, the Steelers are probably going to have to gamble when it comes to this quarterback spot if they are going to go with the Paxton Lynch or if they're going to go with the Wendell Smallwood at running back. If you're going to go with guys that haven't played a snap for the organization yet, you're probably just betting on the guys that you already have. You're probably a little frustrated of them from a season ago, and you're just ready to move on. And if that's the case, then that's totally fine. But you know what? There's probably gonna be a mistake made here and there, just because how can you find your best 53 if you don't play any preseason games? It is a bit of an issue that I think a lot of teams are going to be looking at when it comes to this season. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot more player movement in the early weeks of the regular season than we typically do, just because teams don't really know what they have in some of those undrafted guys. And of course, the Steelers just cut a Breon Borders in favor of keeping around some undrafted guys. Breon Borders, of course, had a pit stop in the XFL, I want to say. He played for the Raiders. He moved around a little bit, and it's really kind of interesting what they will do with those names. Because say if a Trajan Bandy comes in and he struggles in week 1, 2, and 3, you're like, all right, this is an undrafted guy. We cut him. We're not losing any money anyway, and we can just pick up one of those guys who already dropped off. So I think we're going to see a lot of that this year, and that's not something we typically do see, but it wouldn't really surprise me. Some other position battles worth noting, I would say, this year is the curious case of Mr. Curtis Riley, the safety / corner. He might kind of tip the scales for this team. He's not necessarily competing with one person, but if he can prove to play both spots, the Steelers might be more likely to keep him along because, of course, he has experience at corner and at safety. And he is someone that could allow the team to keep a body at a different position if you do have a guy that can do both and play on specials. Another spot kind of worth noting is that inside linebacker 3. Ulysses Gilbert, I would tell you, is the far and away favorite for that spot. And then behind that, it's a little sparse who's going to be playing linebacker. But guys like Robert Spillane, of course, was a beast in special teams. And he isn't going anywhere. So if the Steelers do decide to go with 4 inside linebackers, you're really only going to get one guy that can play that kind of depth spot inside, which will be a little interesting to see how the Steelers play it. They have a plethora of outside linebackers. Does that make them more likely to move a TJ Watt? It might affect his stats a little bit if he takes a snap or two at inside linebacker, if he's not rushing the pass rusher as much. But TJ Watt is a talent. He can. We've seen him line up outside in the slot before, do a little press coverage, and he's impressed at it. We've seen him line up at inside linebacker before, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was needed and say there's a lot of passing downs necessarily upcoming, and Devon Bush needed a rest or whatnot. They could totally move a TJ Watt back there, and I wouldn't be too surprised. Other than that, there's always competitions when it comes to those kind of final guys on the roster, when it comes to guys making special team spots. And one of the interesting things, both myself and Jeffrey Benedict were talking on Beck in Black over on Wednesday night show. We were kind of talking a little bit about that gunner spot, because the Steelers really only have one true gunner from a year ago. And that is an interesting kind of position because it is super important in your punt return game. Do they play a rookie like Chase Claypool there, despite him being a pretty high draft pick and probably command a lot of offensive reps? Do they go with an undrafted guy? Do they go with a Curtis Riley? That is something to keep an eye on. Outside of that, your outside linebacker spots, they're pretty much set in stone. I would hate to say a rookie's just going to step in day one and be your outside linebacker 3, but Alex Highsmith definitely seems like the guy taking a bunch of ups in pass rushing situations. When it comes to giving Bud Dupree or TJ Watt a rest, I just see him stepping in day one and getting more snaps than those guys. And it really would surprise me if that's the way it went over in Ola Denny or Tuzar Skipper, just because Highsmith is a pass rushing guru in college, and I think the team really needs to find out what they have in him if they truly are going to move on from Bud Dupree. They're probably going to be forced to move on from him, so that outside linebacker 3 spot, I think far and away is going to Highsmith. When it comes to the 2 Toledo guys, and Denny and Skipper, they're probably just going to compete with one another throughout their entire careers. I think both guys make the team. When it comes to snaps, I can't really see them making too many defensively unless one can move back a little bit and play a little bit of inside linebacker, which I definitely see as a possibility. But I think both these guys are going to make their money at backup outside linebackers, and probably not much more than that in Pittsburgh. Another name to kind of look on is Marcus Allen. I've seen the live chats coming up a couple times. Marcus Allen, he's pretty much just competing with himself to even stay in the NFL. He, of course, a late-round draft pick, but he is a big-time special teams guy and an impact player in college. So someone Steelers fans were pretty aware of just based on him playing at Penn State, getting a lot of exposure in the market. And for him to not really have done a whole lot in his time in Pittsburgh has been a bit of a disappointment. Of course, the Steelers drafted a safety. They brought in Riley. And now you're still looking at Marcus Allen. You're saying, well, he's still behind Jordan Dangerfield on the depth chart. He's not passing either of the two starters. What is going to happen with his career here? And honestly, I feel like this might be the very end of Marcus Allen, the safety. And other than that, there's not too many spots that my eyes are really trending to when it comes to these position battles. I bet you earlier in the offseason I would have told you Mike Hilton and Cam Sutton, but I'm starting to view Sutton not so much as a nickel corner, but as that kind of backup to Hayden and Nelson on the outside, and a guy that can step in coverage downs, because he is a fairly solid pass DB, and I think his spot is pretty set in stone, and Hilton is their slot guy. And he'll be the slot guy until he's not on this team anymore. So with that said, if you're listening on our podcast platform, we got some more great talk coming to you. We're going to break down the Steelers' starting lineups offensively and defensively come week 1. So make sure to download part 2 of the live mic. For audience watching on YouTube, just stay on. We'll get right back into it shortly. Once again, I am Deputy Editor Michael Beck of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. We got another interesting topic here tonight, and that's kind of where the Steelers are going to turn to their starters in 2020 here. Obviously, kicking things off the top, the most important name that we can always all reliable throughout there. And if he's not starting week 1, I think there's reason to be super concerned about the season. One, Mr. Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger. He is the franchise quarterback that so many have really grown up on, have watched throughout his entire career. He is a guy that he really takes over Steelers offense, the Steelers locker room, and we didn't really notice that much of an impact, I suppose I'm trying to say, because when he was gone, we felt the loss of Big Ben, and in 2018, I think so many of us just kind of felt the luxury of having a franchise quarterback, and it had, at that point, it had been, I believe, 15 years with having a guy that you didn't have to worry about at quarterback. And you look at some other teams across the NFL. You can look at across in the AFC North and look at Cleveland, who seemingly has 1 or 2 different quarterbacks every single season. It's a luxury that I think a lot of us have taken for granted, and it kind of smacked us in the mouth a little bit when Ben went down so abruptly last year. And you know what? I don't think a lot of us are prepared for the imminent retire of Ben Roethlisberger. It's probably not coming in a year or even 2 years, I don't think. But when it does happen, it is going to sting. But Ben is our quarterback. He is our leader. As long as he's the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steelers are competing for a Super Bowl. He could be in year 20. You could throw it back to year 8. Ben Roethlisberger is arguably the greatest quarterback in franchise history. I think guys would probably argue that he is the greatest quarterback in franchise history, comparing him to the great Terry Bradshaw. Those 4 Super Bowl titles are pretty darn impressive, but he did it in the non-free agency era, and that team just couldn't be ripped apart. I could only imagine the 70 Steelers, what they would look like come 1979 if you had to pay all those guys all that money. Just because you look at the great teams nowadays, and they really are ripped apart by the salary cap. So it's definitely an interesting look. When you compare the two, it's kind of hard because of the eras that they played in. But if Ben Roethlisberger were to put up another ring in his career, I think you could undoubtedly say he's the greatest quarterback in franchise history. Of course, he already has all those statistical leader spots. But again, the era he played in. But Ben is our starting quarterback. He will be in 2020. He will be in 2021. And I sure hope he will be again in 2022. Moving things back to running back, I think undoubtedly, unless there's an injury that I'm sure someone's going to point out in the live chat, James Conner. He obviously he's battled a ton of stuff. And one of the surprise non-opt-outs of the kind of opt-out period, of course, with his battles with cancer, James Conner is definitely a warrior, and he is putting himself at risk a little bit just because of everything that he's gone through. Obviously, he's a little bit higher risk with everything that's going on, but he is still the workhorse of this backfield. And the Steelers, when the Steelers think of James Conner, I know some of us are quick to say it's probably time to move on, but he is the guy that they turn to. They turn to him on first, second, and third down, short yardage situations, passing situations. James Conner has been their guy, and he has been since he took over from Le'Veon Bell in 2018. He is someone that can have that 1,000-yard potential if he is a healthy back. But now that there's probably going to be 4 running backs on this roster, I think the team's going to have to spread the ball, spread the love around a little bit, just because you don't want to wear out James Conner, I don't think. And obviously, I think we've learned from the last couple seasons, the running back position gets a ton of wear and tear on the body. And James Conner has obviously been through the ringer already. And you know what? I think if we got any fantasy football players out there, I think he's someone to consider in your leagues because his value is going to be pretty low. But he is a guy that is definitely one of the better backs on the Steelers roster. He is their workhorse for a reason, and he, come week 1, is going to be the starter again. As Awesome Stuff says, he hopes Conner puts up another Pro Bowl year. You know what? If he does that, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Steelers are a playoff team. I think the best way to go about it, though, is to committee the ball a little bit more. And you know what? If there are some cap casualties in 2021, I think the way this backfield shapes up is some sort of duo of Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland Jr. I've chatted about that a little more in depth in the past, but if that's the case, then I think you still get those some reps to see what they can kind of do and carve out their role in a duo type backfield in the future. But James Conner is still someone that should, if he's somewhat healthy, should be flirting with 300 touches. And he is going to be their starter come week 1. Of course, our wide receiver spots, it's a little interesting here because just based on the shorter offseason, I think we are going to see 3 names potentially in the starting lineup. So that first play, it's a little tough to predict the formation, but I'm saying the Steelers are going out 3 wide, and it's going to be the veteran guys that are sitting at the top of the roster already in Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and James Washington. I know a lot of us, myself included, are super high on Chase Claypool, but Chase hasn't had the opportunity to get a whole lot of reps at all. He's not going to get any preseason games, no mini camp, no rookie camp, no OTAs. He is going to be thrown into the fire, and I don't think it'd be fair for the Steelers just to throw him in on the first snap and say, hey, good luck, kid. But it would be kind of a Steelers move to throw him out there on the field and make him run a go route and just throw it up to him and say, here you go, here's your shot. Welcome to the NFL. That wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think that's the way they're going to go about it. I think the veteran guys on this roster probably take that first snap. I wouldn't even be surprised if Ben were to throw to Juju on that first play, going deep, just like, hey, we are back, both of us. NFL, you've been put on notice. Week 1, play 1, New York Giants, Monday Night Football. that if I had to predict a play, that's what I'm dialing up right now. Oftentimes when Ben is coming back off an injury, he will just sling it down the field and in his first play. So to be honest, if I was a betting man, I'd put my money on that being the first play of the game. The other wide receivers, of course, Deontay Johnson, I think someone who has 1,000-yard potential, and James Washington, who will be the next feature my A to Z segment. That will be out August 15th for those of you listening on our podcast platform, is Mr. James Washington. And I am kind of predicting for him a little bit of a step back sort of a year. Not so much in his physical growth as a football player, but statistically, I think it's just going to happen because of what's above him on the depth chart. Of course, both Juju and Deontay missed a little bit of time last year with injury, and James Washington kind of flourished as someone getting some higher targets. So I kind of expect a little bit less yardage, a little bit less receptions out of him, but I think he is definitely going to be a guy that features a little bit more in 2021 if a Juju Smith-Schuster is to team via agents team can't afford him. Moving things on to tight end, another guy I picked to be on the field is not an incumbent. It's not going to be Vance McDonald, but I think Eric Ebron lines up on the field come play one. And it kind of boils down to the Steelers loving to say, this is what we got. Here we go. And, Ben on the play one, I guarantee it. If it's on the Vegas betting odds, you heard it here first. If you lose money on that, you can't blame me though. But if there are odds on what the first play of the game is going to be, I'm calling a Ben Roethlisberger pass. And Eric Ebron could also be a target of that, just based on his coming back from an ankle injury himself. And his love affair with the Steelers, of course, is blown up all over social media already. When it comes to the offensive line, I don't think there's going to be too many big surprises here. And what probably will do is Al staying at that all-important left tackle spot. He is in the contract year, as well as some other guys on this offensive line. But I wouldn't be surprised if Big Al is kind of winding down his career a little bit. And I don't know if the Steelers are going to be able to afford especially if he's expecting the same numbers from his contract that he is currently on. But Big Al, again, Alejandro Villanueva will be that starting left tackle, I think, mostly because, and if you think he had a down last year, I have to keep reiterating the fact he played a ton of outstanding pass rushers, both the Bosa brothers, Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, of course. He has had one of the toughest 2019 seasons, and he played with quarterbacks that he didn't have the chemistry with, because of course Ben Roethlisberger is great at stepping up in the pocket. Hodges and Rudolph struggled a bit at doing that a few times in 2019. So I'd expect a bounce back from Villanueva. At guard, I got Filer kicking back in. Of course, he kind of started last year at guard. Injury concerns made him bounce out to tackle. Now he's bouncing back to guard. In training camp, he's pretty much exclusively played as a guard, and I fully expect him to be the starting left guard on this Pittsburgh Steelers team. I think he would have taken the job over Ramon Foster a year ago if that's what happened. So I fully expect Filer to be that starting left guard. At center, old reliable again. Marquise Pouncey isn't going anywhere. He'll be the starting center again, and he'll push to be another Pro Bowl player. I think his play kind of regressed marginally last year, but he's still a beloved member of the Steelers team, and Steelers fans love voting our guys in the Pro Bowl. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got the nod another time. At guard, David DeCastro. What's there to say about him other than his decade of dominance that he's already put up in the NFL? I think Big Dave, if he were to add a ring to his resume, could possibly surpass Alan Faneca in a lot of our eyes as the greatest guard in Steelers history. One ring I think might just tie him. They've both been dominant of their era. Alan Faneca should be a Hall of Famer. I think David DeCastro with a ring is a Hall of Famer. If he plays another 5 solid years of All-Pro, Pro Bowl football, he'll be a Hall of Famer. So those legacy things are always interesting to me, but DeCastro's going to be your starting guard. That wouldn't surprise me. And a name we touched in part one of our training camp battles podcast at right tackle, I have Mr. Zach Banner. I'm torn on this one. I think I picked Zach a little bit just based on our little chat that we had on Behind the Steel Curtain when he came on the program. I think he is going to take the spot, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if Chooks was the starting right tackle. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think, to be honest with you, I think if Filer were to have kicked into guard last year, I think Chooks would have just been the starter already. But Banner's changed his body. He's in great shape. He played a ton last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he played himself in a starting spot. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was a swing tackle and then ended up the starting tackle next year if Big Al were to be moved on from. Kicking over to the defense now, this unit, I think, doesn't have too many surprises. There's some names that aren't going to surprise you guys just based on how good they were last year. Right off the top, we can just talk about TJ Watt. He is. I don't know if you've seen how many of you guys. Photos of training camp you guys have seen, but TJ looks to have put his strength and conditioning program into another level this year. The man is absolutely shredded. He's damn near looking like a bodybuilder out there on the field. It is kind of crazy to think a TJ Watt who put up the numbers he did last year that should have received some more votes for Defensive Player of the Year than he did, coming back in even better shape, but the eye test would tell you that he is. The man looks like he's on a mission, and he seems motivated to say the absolute least. I think TJ Watt, if he wasn't the Defensive Player of the Year this year, I think that means one of two things: one, he got injured, or two, someone else just went absolutely crazy. Maybe Aaron Donald has 25 sacks at D tackle, and there's no way they're not going to give that guy the award if he can do that as an interior defensive lineman. But I can't see it happen. I feel like TJ is going to do something special in 2020. Oh, I hope the season happens because TJ is going to do something crazy. If I was a betting man, if you can bet the odds that he breaks James Harrison's 16 sacks in a season record, I'd put money down that he does. TJ Watt, goodness me, he seems to be a man possessed right now, and I think he's going to be kind of your team MVP again in 2020. Moving into our defensive interior here, Cameron Hayward, of course, the defensive leader, double-digit sack from that inside spot, which is just insane. Coming into a contract year, he's motivated. He wants a Super Bowl. He's another guy that I when it comes to sacks in this defense, any guy on the starting interior four, I wouldn't be surprised if we had four of those guys have double-digit sacks because they all have that potential. And what's crazy here is they're going to be stealing each other's stats because they're going to be beating each other, the quarterback. And potentially if TJ Watt was on a worse team, maybe he could put up 21 sacks. Maybe he just hits 17 this year because Bud Dupree beat him to the quarterback twice. Cameron Hayward beats him to the quarterback. The next name on our starter list, Stefan Tuitt, beats him to the quarterback. And with Stefan Tuitt coming back from a pectoral injury, him starting week 1 is exciting because up until he got injured in week 6, he was arguably the best defensive player on that unit last year, which is insane to think about because they had two guys in the conversation Defensive Player of the Year award not named Stefan Tuitt. Mika Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt, of course, being those guys, but Stefan Tuitt, oh my goodness, if he could be as good as he was a year ago, can this defensive unit average less than 10 points a game? Is that legitimately possible in today's NFL? I don't understand why these guys are getting slept on so much because you look across the board at this defense, it is special. There's a reason to be excited. They got a guy at every single spot, and I don't know how many defenses throughout history have had that luxury, and they have depth at a lot of these spots too, which blows my mind. Kicking things out again to our other outside linebacker and rounding off our core four, our defensive front four, make that Bud Dupree, Mr. Breakout 2019, Mr. Contract year, playing on the franchise tag, got a big bump in salary when you're playing on that tag, but he's looking for an even bigger payday in 2021. And if he can put up another big season, he is going to get it. He's going to get it somewhere too. That's probably, unfortunately, not Pittsburgh. So this could be the last year of a really special defense. But Bud Dupree, oh my goodness, if he can put up another dozen sacks, this team, I tell you what, is going to do something special. Who are you going to not double team? That's the question. Who are you going to let feast? Who are you going to let get the sacks? Obviously, TJ Watt's going to get double teamed. If Stefan Tuitt's the best defensive player on this team again, he's getting double teamed. Does that mean Cameron Hayward's going to go off? Is he going to break James Harrison's sack record? Potentially. Bud Dupree, I don't think Bud Dupree's going to face a double team all year long, and he is going to feast if he can bring it every play like he did a year ago, and it wouldn't surprise me. Could we get 40 sacks out of those four guys, those first four names I just listed? Gosh, the rest of the NFL better hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened because they are extremely talented and such a tight-knit group. Kicking things back to inside linebacker, the first name on the list, Mr. Pony Fade, who no longer is rocking that pony fade. Devon Bush cut that thing off the back of his head. I think Cam Hayward finally bullied it off of him. Of course, you've seen those Twitter rants between the two. Michigan and Ohio State products always barbing at each other. But the pony fade is gone, as some of us have noticed on some of the Steelers' picks from training camp. So Devon Bush, I expect a big bump in year two. He at times early last year, he struggled a little bit, just kind of learning formation, assignment, whatnot. An extra year in the system, I see no reason to believe why he won't be better than he was a year ago. And he was still, I believe, was just absolutely standing as a rookie. Devon Bush, that was a trade the Steelers needed to make to address that inside linebacker position. And it's worked out for them spades so far. And I seriously couldn't say it any better, but Devon Bush taking an even bigger step forward this year and potentially earning his first Pro Bowl nomination, which knowing Steelers Nation, I think we probably get that job done. The guy lining up beside him, I think some Steelers fans might be expecting it to be one Ulysses Gilbert III potentially being the starter, but I think Williams bounced back from it is kind of down this year. A year ago, he played last year. The Steelers' run defense was way better than it was when he was not on the field. He battled a bit of injury that I don't think was reported as much as it should have been, because I think he plays a whole lot more if he's healthier last year. And I don't know how much Mark Barron necessarily plays if Vince Williams was a bit healthier, especially on those running situations. Vince Williams, expect if you get a healthy 16 out of him, of course he is aging, make that, but I wouldn't be too surprised if that is something that we saw out of him. And then that rounds out our front. In this case, our front six. Our next guy we're going to list off here, Mr. Mike Hilton in the slot. He's another guy that's going to pay 21. Really stinks that the salary cap could be dropped. The Steelers have so many guys that are in need of a new contract here, and obviously, I know a few of us are kind of hoping for these deals coming through the pipeline in the next couple of days here. But with so much uncertainty surrounding the cap, the Steelers would probably be foolish to be signing guys to these long-term deals now, unless they were back-ended with all the money coming off the books in 2025. That's not going to happen. He'll be song, but I wouldn't be surprised if he can rack up a couple sacks, if he could haul in a couple picks. But the thing is, the Steelers don't have any cap space, but neither does the rest of the NFL. So it's potential he could come back and just kind of get the short end of the stick, I guess you want to say, in terms of money. I don't know what Mike Hilton's going to command on the open market, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. What the cornerback duo, I argue, at the very least, is a top 5 cornerback duo in the NFL and potentially the deepest position on this entire Steelers team in Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson. Oh, Joe Hayden just keeps bringing it. He is, I believe, entering year 11 now, 31 years of age, out of the University of Florida. What a free agent ad both of these guys were. Steven Nelson projects, and you know what, before I even mention it, Steven Nelson, the Steelers signing him to a 3-year deal kind of makes me sick now, because he is going to get paid at the end of 2021 season. In that 2022 offseason, that man is going to be one of the highest paid corners in football. Wow, what an ad he has been. Those two guys combined for, I believe, 6 interceptions last year. That number could be even more than that, especially if the Steelers start playing with leads, which they didn't do a whole lot last year, and especially if the offense starts to blow up a little bit, put some more points on the board to force opposition offenses to throw the ball down the field a whole lot more. There's going to be a whole lot more opportunity for interceptions across the board. And I feel like I'm gushing and just saying, like, all these guys are going to get crazy stats, but they all could potentially have some ridiculous stat line. The thing is, the only guys that are going to take away the stats from these Steelers defenders are each other, because they're just so good as a unit. They're going to be flying all over the field, and I wouldn't be surprised if either of these corners break 5 interceptions apiece. Joe Hayden's career interceptions statistical lead was 6 in a year. He did that as a member of the Cleveland Browns. I'd love to see him match that or even surpass it. Joe Hayden, at this point in his career, honestly, he feels more like a Steelers legend than he does a Browns player. I wonder what your guys' thoughts are on that. Make sure you hit up the live chat. I wonder if Joe Hayden, at this point, if you feel like he is a Steeler, he should retire Steeler, or if he is a Cleveland Brown still, if his career were to come to an end, say, after this season, just hypothetically speaking. Lastly, our 2 safety spots. Terrell Edmonds, I will break down first a little bit here. He kind of gets a short end of the stick as well sometimes from us as fans, being caught out of position. But sometimes I don't know if that's necessarily on him. I think that might be some breakdowns elsewhere. But Edmonds is a guy that if he can take that next step, if he can be better in the pass game, if he can develop those on-ball skills, there is no weak spot in the Steelers defense then. And I think Terrell Edmonds is kind of the key here. If he is someone that can really kind of figure it out, if he can put it together this year, we are talking Super Bowl defense. Dare I say a defense that should be mentioned with the 76 Steelers, the 85 Bears, the 2008 Steelers even. There's a lot of great defensive units in football, but the Pittsburgh Steelers of 2020, I think, should be one of them, especially if teams start to fold because of the whole pandemic thing and slow starts. And I think the best teams this year are going to put up the best stats, and they're going to bury the worst teams more so than ever, especially with not having a crowd. The momentum's just going to follow the teams that are better, and that's what it's going to come down to. And the Steelers are really good this year, especially since they added the last guy in this list, Mika Fitzpatrick. What can you say about Mika other than when he came to the team, this defense went from good – no, not even good. They went from great to elite. And Mika Fitzpatrick, he didn't get a single rep in training camp a year ago. He came in week 3, Tuesday, heading into San Francisco. He was responsible for either 2 or 3 turnovers. I know he got that interception, forced a fumble. I can't remember if he forced 2 fumbles. But oh my goodness, Mika Fitzpatrick, what a trade that was. And of course, seeing that Jamal Adams deal coming down through the pipeline, it blows my mind at an absolute steal that we only got the guy for 1 first-round pick. If you had to redo that deal this year, Mika Fitzpatrick's probably going for at least 2 picks, 2 first-round picks make that, and probably something else too. So this Steelers defense is absolutely loaded across the board. Their depth chart is honestly makes me a little giddy. If there's an injury, I have no problem if Cam Sutton has to hit the field. If Alex Highsmith is asked to take more snaps, he is someone in Charlotte that when he during his college career put up a ridiculous amount of stats, And Dabo Swinney of a Clemson team that came within one game of the national championship, he gave a ton of praise to Mr. Highsmith, and he is definitely going to be someone who's a contributing factor of this team in the future. This Steelers team, when you look at that 53, I don't see why there's no reason that they can't compete with the Baltimore Ravens, why they can't compete with the Kansas City Chiefs, why they can't be in a Super Bowl, why they can't be hoisting a Lombardi at the end of the 2020 season. They have what it takes. I think having a veteran quarterback like Ben is going to be an advantage in a super strange offseason advantage Steelers compared to a Baltimore or Kansas City with their young guys. Of course, those two QBs, they do some great stuff, and I probably would expect more greatness out of them. But the veteran abilities of Ben, and combined with this defense, if the Steelers are averaging 23 points a game on offense, I can't see them lose more than 4 games, to be honest with you. It just doesn't. The talent of this defense, even if there is injury, this team is going to win games. There's just too much depth, too much talent. And if they can take leads, if Ben's elbow is good, this Steelers team should be flirting with that AFC North title if they can do that. I don't see why they can't be competing for that single bye spot. Of course, that 7-team expanded playoffs. There's absolutely no reason the Steelers, at the very least, won't be one of the 3 wildcard teams. And you know what? I don't see a reason why they should be finishing second or worse in this division. I don't see it happening. I think the Steelers team is going to be one we talk about for years to come. Let's just hope the season gets underway. With that all said, and while I sign off here, I just want to make sure before we get out that all you guys that are in the live chat or listening live right now, head over to our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, Behind the Steel Curtain. On Twitter and Instagram, the handle is at BT Steel Curtain. On Facebook, you can just search Behind the Steel Curtain. We are running that contest, Dying Moments, right now. Once I sign off here, we will be picking a winner. I'll be throwing a graphic together, and at noon tomorrow Eastern time, we will be revealing our winner of the jersey, signed Juju Smith-Schuster jersey. So make sure you go look at all those options, because we want to reward you guys, our BTSC loyalists. And I want to thank you guys for tuning along with me today. As always, I am Deputy Editor Michael Beck, running the social media these days, so I hope you're enjoying that content as well. Thanks for tuning along to the live mic, guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great